November 12, 1983, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nathan Quincy hunched deeper into his wool coat as he crossed Harvard Yard, his breath creating ghostly plumes in the frigid morning air. The massive oak trees stood like sentinels against the gray sky, their branches bare and reaching skyward like skeletal hands. His worn leather messenger bag, crammed with engineering textbooks and problem sets, thumped rhythmically against his hip as he made his way toward the science center. As a junior majoring in electrical engineering with a focus on semiconductor technology, Nathan's world revolved around circuits, algorithms, and the cutting-edge computing systems just beginning to reshape society. When not buried in his studies, he worked part-time at the university's computer lab, helping fellow students navigate the intimidating world of early personal computers. His grades were solid, if unspectacular, and his modest apartment off-campus reflected the typical Spartan existence of a scholarship student stretching every dollar. The Reagan years had intensified the Cold War tensions that formed the backdrop of Nathan's life. The president's evil empire speech earlier that year had crystallized the threat for many Americans, while the Soviet downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 in September had brought the world to another flashpoint. But these geopolitical concerns felt distant to Nathan, whose most pressing worry was securing a research position that might lead to a job after graduation. That changed on a Tuesday morning when Professor Karev, a visiting lecturer from the University of Pennsylvania, stepped into Nathan's advanced semiconductor design seminar. "Good morning," Karev said, his voice carrying a trace of Eastern European accent despite decades in America. The professor was in his 60s, with a fringe of silver hair surrounding a bald dome and wire-rimmed glasses perched on a prominent nose. He wore a tweed jacket with leather elbow patches that had seen better days. "Professor Denning is ill today. I'll be covering his lecture on manufacturing tolerances in chip production," Karev explained, unpacking a slide carousel from his worn briefcase. "I understand many of you are interested in research opportunities. I may have some available for exceptional students. Please see me after class if interested." Nathan listened with growing excitement as Karev delivered a lecture that went far beyond the basic material in their textbooks, touching on manufacturing processes that seemed years ahead of what they'd been studying. When the class ended, Nathan joined 3 other students who approached the professor. "What type of research positions are available, sir?" asked one. "I need assistance for a project involving signal processing," Karev replied, handing each student a card. "Semiconductor fabrication experience preferred. The position includes access to advanced equipment not available in undergraduate labs." Nathan examined the simple white business card. It contained only Karev's name, university affiliation, and a phone number. "Call to arrange an interview," Karev said, nodding at Nathan. "I understand you work in the computer lab? Experience with hardware integration would be valuable." "Yes, sir," Nathan replied, wondering how Karev knew about his job. That evening, Nathan called the number and was invited to meet Karev the following afternoon at a coffee shop near Harvard Square. The location seemed odd for a professional meeting, but Nathan dismissed his concerns, eager for research experience that might distinguish his graduate school applications. The next day, Nathan arrived 15 minutes early at the Café Prague, a small establishment tucked between a bookstore and record shop. Inside, the cafe was dimly lit, with dark wood paneling and small tables. The air smelled of fresh coffee and cigarette smoke, and a handful of patrons were scattered around, reading newspapers or engaged in hushed conversations. Karev arrived precisely on time, ordered tea in a low voice, then led Nathan to a corner table far from other customers. The professor's demeanor had changed. Gone was the academic formality, replaced by a watchful intensity that made Nathan uneasy. "Mr. Quincy," Karev began after the waitress had departed, "your professors speak highly of your technical abilities, but before discussing the position, I must know your views on international scientific cooperation. The question seemed oddly political for a job interview. I believe science benefits from collaboration, sir, Nathan replied cautiously. Karev nodded approvingly. The artificial divisions between East and West impede human progress. Wouldn't you agree? The Reagan administration's restrictions on scientific exchange are unfortunate. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. I haven't given it much thought. Perhaps you should, Karev said, leaning forward. American universities waste resources duplicating research already completed elsewhere. My project involves adapting certain international findings to American manufacturing contexts. The conversation proceeded along increasingly strange lines, with Karev making thinly veiled criticisms of American technology policy while probing Nathan's political views. Finally, after nearly an hour, Karev seemed satisfied. The position pays $300 weekly, cash, he said, sliding a folded paper across the table. Report to this address Saturday morning. Tell no one about our arrangement. University politics, you understand. Competition for funding is fierce. Nathan unfolded the paper to find an address in Somerville, a working-class neighborhood north of Cambridge. The salary was extraordinarily generous for a research assistant position, nearly triple what Nathan earned at the computer lab. Though something felt off about the entire encounter, the money would allow him to focus on his studies without constantly worrying about rent and tuition. I'll be there, Nathan said. 3 days later, Nathan found himself in front of a nondescript 3-story building in a commercial district of Somerville. A small brass plaque beside the entrance read, Atlantic Technical Consulting. Inside, Karev greeted him and led him up a narrow staircase to a second-floor laboratory. The space was impressive, far better equipped than university labs, with oscilloscopes, signal generators, and other electronic testing equipment arranged on long workbenches. Most notably, a section contained what appeared to be partially disassembled computer components unlike any Nathan had seen before. Your primary task will be documenting and testing these circuit designs, Karev explained, handing Nathan a lab coat. You'll work alone most days. I'll check your progress twice weekly. Over the following weeks, Nathan fell into a routine, spending Saturdays and 2 evenings each week at the Somerville lab. The work was fascinating, analyzing circuit boards with unusual components and configuration patterns that seemed more elegant and efficient than American designs. Gradually, Nathan realized he was reverse engineering technology that wasn't commercially available in the United States. When he questioned Karev about the equipment's origin, the professor was evasive. These are prototype designs from European researchers, part of an international exchange program. One evening in December, Nathan was working late, meticulously documenting a particularly intricate circuit board, when he noticed something unusual. Embedded in the corner of the board was a tiny marking, Cyrillic characters followed by what appeared to be a serial number. The component's arrangement suddenly seemed familiar, reminding him of diagrams he'd seen in a technical journal discussing Soviet computing advances. Nathan's stomach tightened. The Cold War might have seemed abstract to him before, but he understood enough to know that transferring certain technologies to the Soviet bloc was illegal under U.S. export restrictions. Was he unwittingly participating in something illicit? That night, unable to sleep, Nathan wrestled with his suspicions. Perhaps there was an innocent explanation. International scientific collaboration happened all the time, despite political tensions. But why the secrecy? Why cash payments? Why a private lab instead of university facilities? The next morning, Nathan made a decision. Instead of confronting Karev directly, he would investigate further. After his Monday classes, he visited Harvard's Widener Library and spent hours in the periodical section, combing through scientific journals and technical publications. What he found chilled him. Several of the circuit designs he'd been documenting bore striking similarities to components described in Soviet technical journals or technology that shouldn't have been available in the West. That evening, Nathan returned to his apartment to find the door unlocked. He was certain he had locked it that morning. Heart pounding, he pushed the door open slowly. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance, but when he checked his desk, he noticed his notebook containing observations about the lab work was missing. Someone had searched his apartment. The next day, Nathan arrived at his electromagnetic theory class to find a different professor at the lectern. Professor Karev has been called away unexpectedly, the substitute announced. He will not be returning this semester. After class, Nathan approached the department secretary. Do you have a forwarding address for Professor Karev? He was supervising some research. I'm sorry, she replied, but he left no contact information. Very sudden family emergency, I believe. That afternoon, Nathan walked past the Somerville lab building to find its windows dark and a for lease sign in the window. Atlantic Technical Consulting had vanished overnight. Now genuinely alarmed, Nathan considered his options. Going to the university administration seemed pointless. What proof did he have beyond his own involvement in what might be illegal activity? The police? They'd likely dismiss his concerns as collegiate paranoia during these tense Cold War years. Then he remembered Professor Daniel Westfield, his freshman advisor. Westfield had mentioned serving in military intelligence before joining academia. Perhaps he would understand the situation without immediately assuming Nathan was either paranoid or complicit. Westfield agreed to meet Nathan for coffee off campus. The professor, a trim man in his 50s with a military posture and calculating eyes, listened without interruption as Nathan recounted his experience with Karev. When Nathan finished, Westfield's expression was grave. Did Karev ever mention the name of his European researchers? No, sir. Did he introduce you to anyone else connected with the project? No, but there must have been others. New components would appear between my visits, and sometimes my work would be gone, replaced with new items. Westfield nodded slowly. Nathan, I need you to tell me everything you can remember about the components you examined: manufacturing marks, design peculiarities, anything. For the next hour, Nathan detailed the technical specifications as best he could recall. Westfield took no notes but listened with intense concentration. When Nathan finished, the professor leaned forward. I'm going to make a phone call, he said quietly. Wait here. Westfield returned 20 minutes later. I've spoken with former colleagues. They'd like to talk with you. The former colleagues turned out to be two men who met them at a hotel room near Harvard Square. They identified themselves only as Jim and Robert from the FBI's counterintelligence division. For hours, they questioned Nathan about Karev, the laboratory, and the equipment he'd handled. We believe you've stumbled onto a Soviet technology transfer operation, Jim finally explained. Leonid Karev is not his real name, and he's not from the University of Pennsylvania. We've been tracking several Soviet illegals attempting to acquire American semiconductor technology. Illegals? Nathan asked. Deep-cover KGB officers living under false identities, Robert clarified. They recruit Americans with access to restricted technology. Students are ideal targets, financially vulnerable, access to research facilities, and often politically idealistic. Nathan felt sick. Was I helping them steal American technology? No, Jim replied. The opposite, actually. You were helping them understand technology they'd already acquired elsewhere. The Soviets are years behind in semiconductor manufacturing. They needed someone who could explain how the components work so they could replicate them. What happens now? Nathan asked. Karev and his network have clearly been alerted and have gone to ground. We need to identify the entire cell, Robert said. And that's where you could help us. How? By continuing your work, under our supervision. The FBI agents explained their plan. Nathan would return to his normal routine but would quietly signal that he was looking for Karev to continue their research. The FBI believed other members of the network might approach Nathan, seeing him as already proven trustworthy. It's completely voluntary, Jim emphasized. This isn't without risk. Nathan thought about what he'd unwittingly become involved in. The realization that he'd been manipulated by Soviet intelligence filled him with both fear and anger. "I'll do it," he said finally. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Nathan attended classes, worked at the computer lab, and casually mentioned to classmates that he was trying to reconnect with Professor Karev about a research opportunity. He began to think the FBI agents were mistaken. Then, on a snowy January evening, Olivia Hendricks approached him in the computer lab. Nathan recognized her from his electromagnetic theory class, a quiet graduate student who rarely contributed to discussions. With chestnut hair cut in a practical bob and wireframe glasses, she had always struck him as intensely serious. "I heard you're looking for Professor Karev," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan's pulse quickened. "Yes, we were working on a project before he left. He had to return to Pennsylvania urgently," she said. "But the research continues. If you're still interested, there's a position available." Following FBI instructions, Nathan expressed enthusiasm while revealing nothing. Olivia instructed him to meet her the following evening at a different address, this one in Cambridge. That night, Nathan met with Jim and Robert in their hotel room to plan the next steps. They fitted him with a hidden recording device, a miniature tape recorder concealed in a modified wallet, and reviewed safety protocols. "Don't push for information," Robert instructed. "Let them volunteer it. Your job is simply to observe and record. If you feel in danger at any point, use the phrase 'my professor really emphasized this point' in conversation. We'll have agents nearby." The next evening, Nathan met Olivia at a small office above a print shop in Cambridge. She led him to a room similar to the Somerville lab, though smaller and less equipped. 2 other people were present, an older man introduced only as Dr. Morris, and a young man close to Nathan's age named Victor. "Professor Karev spoke highly of your work," Dr. Morris said, studying Nathan with piercing blue eyes. "We're continuing his research into signal processing applications. Same terms as before, cash payment, discretion required." For the next 3 hours, Nathan was given circuit boards to analyze similar to those he'd worked with previously. He carefully followed the FBI's instructions, asking natural questions about the project while revealing nothing about his suspicions. The recording device in his wallet captured everything. This routine continued for nearly a month. Twice weekly, Nathan would visit the Cambridge lab, document technology for the group, and report everything to his FBI handlers. Gradually, the group began to trust him. Olivia, in particular, seemed to take a personal interest, occasionally suggesting they get coffee after work sessions. During one such coffee meeting, Olivia revealed more than she intended. "The components you're analyzing will help bridge significant technological gaps in computing infrastructure," she said. "American embargo policies have created artificial barriers to scientific progress in certain countries." "Which countries benefit from this research?" Nathan asked casually. Olivia seemed to catch herself. "Various research institutions with limited access to Western technology," she replied carefully. "I should go. Early class tomorrow." The following day, Nathan reported the conversation to his FBI handlers. "She almost slipped," he explained. "I think she's ideologically motivated, not just doing this for money. We need to identify their communication methods and the full network before moving in," Jim explained. "Keep gaining their trust." A breakthrough came in late February. While working late at the lab, Nathan observed Dr. Morris removing a panel from the wall near the electrical outlet, placing what appeared to be a microfilm canister inside, then replacing the panel. After Morris and Victor left, Nathan casually mentioned to Olivia that he needed to check a circuit connection near that same outlet. While pretending to work near the wall, Nathan glimpsed inside the hidden compartment. Along with the microfilm, he spotted several small envelopes and what appeared to be a one-time pad for encoding messages, sheets of random numbers used for creating unbreakable ciphers. What exactly happens to our research? Nathan asked Olivia as they prepared to leave. I mean, where does it go after we document everything? Olivia hesitated. Dr. Morris handles that part. There are researchers elsewhere who synthesize our findings. In Pennsylvania? Where Karev went. Not exactly, she said with a slight smile. But don't worry about that part. It's better if each person only understands their specific role. Nathan reported his discovery to the FBI that night. It's a dead drop, Robert explained. A hiding place for leaving messages or materials without direct contact between agents. This confirms our suspicion that they're using compartmentalized cells. Classic KGB tradecraft. The investigation accelerated. The FBI placed the lab under surveillance, photographing everyone entering or leaving the building. Nathan was instructed to maintain his routine but to watch for any changes in the group's behavior. The end came more suddenly than expected. In early March, Nathan arrived at the lab to find only Victor present, looking nervous. "Where's everyone?" Nathan asked. "Dr. Morris and Olivia had to reschedule," Victor replied, not meeting Nathan's eyes. "They'll be here later. We should get started." Nathan sensed something was wrong. Victor had never supervised him alone before. As they worked, Victor asked unusual questions about Nathan's background, his family, and his political views, the kind of questions Karev had asked during their first meeting. "My professor really emphasized this point about signal degradation," Nathan said, using the danger phrase while pointing to a circuit board. "Don't you think this design addresses that problem effectively?" Victor nodded distractedly. "Yes, sure. Listen, Dr. Morris mentioned possibly expanding our work to include some friends at MIT. Do you know anyone there we might approach?" Nathan realized with a chill that he was being assessed as a potential recruiter for the network. "I might," he replied non-committally. "I'd need to think about it." 20 minutes later, the door burst open. FBI agents flooded the room, weapons drawn. "Federal agents. Don't move." Victor lunged for a briefcase, but an agent tackled him before he could reach it. Nathan was pushed against the wall and handcuffed, part of the plan to protect his cover. Everyone in the room was detained and separated. Hours later, in a federal building downtown, Nathan sat across from Jim and Robert as they explained what had happened. "We intercepted a coded message from their Moscow control ordering an immediate evaluation of your reliability," Jim explained. "They were becoming suspicious, standard procedure before expanding a network's activities. Once we saw they were testing you, we had to move." "What about Olivia and Dr. Morris?" Nathan asked. "Arrested at Logan Airport attempting to board separate flights," Robert replied. Olivia Hendricks's real name is Olga Hashman, a trained KGB officer. She entered the country 2 years ago using forged Canadian credentials. Dr. Morris is actually Mikhail Petrov, another illegal who's been in place since 1978. And Victor, American, graduate student at Boston University, recruited through a Marxist study group 3 years ago. He's cooperating now, claiming he thought he was simply sharing academic research. What happens to them? Petrov and Hashman will likely be traded back to the Soviets for Western assets. Victor faces espionage charges, though he'll probably get a reduced sentence for cooperation. In the weeks that followed, Nathan learned the full scope of what he'd helped uncover. The KGB operation had been targeting American semiconductor technology, particularly military applications. The network extended to technical employees at 3 defense contractors and included 2 other university connections. The components Nathan had analyzed were often stolen prototypes being prepared for Soviet reproduction. The FBI kept Nathan's involvement confidential, creating a cover story that the investigation began with an anonymous tip. He was moved to a different apartment for security and continued his studies under occasional protective surveillance. That summer, Nathan was approached about working for U.S. intelligence after graduation. The offer was tempting, but his experience had shown him the personal cost of living in the shadowy world between opposing powers. Instead, he focused on completing his degree, eventually taking a research position with a private technology firm in California's emerging Silicon Valley. Years later, after the Berlin Wall fell and the Cold War ended, Nathan received an unmarked envelope containing only a newspaper clipping. It was from a Russian newspaper, reporting the rehabilitation of several former intelligence officers, including one Olga Hashmanova, who had served with distinction in foreign operations. Nathan tucked the clipping into a desk drawer next to his Harvard diploma. The Cold War had ended, but its echoes remained, a reminder of a time when a college student unwittingly stepped into a world where technology, ideology, and espionage intersected in the halls of academia. In the new world of post-Soviet relations, Nathan sometimes wondered what had become of Olivia or Olga and the others. Had they been true believers or simply professionals doing their job? In the gray world of espionage, such distinctions often blurred, leaving only the understanding that in the shadow war between superpowers, ordinary people became unwitting pawns in a game whose rules they never fully comprehended.